She'll be speaking to us about the right detox, the beginning of the rest of your life in 5 easy steps. Can you please put your hands together for Britt Hermes?
Hi there. So I need to start by giving you all a little bit of a warning. You are about to enter another dimension. A dimension not only of nature and beauty, but one of magical healing powers. A wondrous journey into the land of medicine. Your next stop, the naturopathic zone. Hi there. I'm a naturopathic doctor. My patients call me Dr. Britt. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the right detox. Processed foods, pesticides, and other toxic chemicals are making us sick. We encounter these toxins everywhere. In order to be healthy in today's world, we must detoxify. Early in my life, I learned how food and chemicals can affect my health. As a teenager, I was diagnosed with psoriasis. Almost every surface of my body was covered with these unsightly plaques. I asked my dermatologist what I could do, and he prescribed lifelong use of steroids. When I asked about alternatives, he said, "This is it." I refused to accept this. Instead, I decided to research natural remedies on my own. I began to remove toxic chemicals and foods from my life. I decided to rebuild my digestive health with probiotics and enzymes, and I took cod liver oil and supplements to reduce inflammation. Without steroids, my skin improved, and so did my health. My amazing recovery inspired me to become a naturopathic doctor. I designed this program, The Right Detox, based on my experience and my confidence that you too will benefit from natural medicine. The Right Detox uses the body's own detoxification systems, making the program safe and effective. I'm excited for you to use the Right Detox and to achieve your health goals. Welcome to the beginning of the rest of your life. Yes, I actually read that speech in front of an audience to sell a program called The Right Detox. So how did I go from that world to speaking here at QED? Well, let's continue our journey back in time a little bit further, and let's take a look at who I was leading up to making The Right Detox. In 2007, I started naturopathic school at Bastyr. Bastyr has a really strong reputation. It is known as the Harvard of natural medicine. I was already skeptical of the healthcare system. I had been using natural remedies myself for a long time, and I was convinced that these had drove my psoriasis away. When I told my psoriasis story, I conveniently forgot that I consistently used steroid creams or prescription shampoos on a regular basis. I also found out later that a tonsillectomy I had when I was 21 probably also contributed to helping to clear up my skin. Obviously, I was not a very good critical thinker. I was suffering from a combination of confirmation bias, appeal to nature, and Texas sharpshooting. Naturopathy is hard to define. It is entirely composed of basically any piece of alternative medicine that you can imagine. What makes Bastyr and the other schools like it so special is that they teach naturopathy alongside just a teeny tiny bit of real medicine to make the whole thing seem legitimate. For example, I took a gross anatomy lab. I dissected cadavers. I took a physiology course, I took a histology lab, and I took biochemistry classes. On paper, it sort of looks like I went to medical school. And I was even allowed to borrow federal student loan money to pay for my tuition, which cost just as much as real medical school, $45,000 per year. But integrated into every class I took was bullshit. Let me show you some examples. These are some of my notes from a pediatric class I took. Here I have listed different homeopathic remedies that we use to treat various acute medical conditions. At the bottom, you can see I have written belladonna to treat febrile seizures. Yes, this is the deadly nightshade, and some of you may know from following the news that the homeopathic belladonna has now been linked to, I think, at least 10 children's deaths and over 400 injuries in the US. So homeopathy may not be so safe and gentle. And integrated into my pediatrics class was a ton of anti-vaccine thinking. We were taught to delay and to limit vaccines. We were required to read the Dr. Bob Sears alternative vaccine book. We were taught to doubt the medical consensus, the health authorities, and the vaccine research on vaccine safety. It's as if Andrew Wakefield himself wrote this part of the course. Let's move on to neurology. These are notes I have about treating traumatic brain injuries. Neurotransmitter work. Now, this is code for prescribing a very expensive line of supplements that are packaged alongside blood tests that supposedly can measure neurotransmitter levels. You do the test, you prescribe a supplement. It's a nice business plan. Here I have arnica. So arnica is another homeopathic remedy that you can use to treat bumps and bruises and injuries. And I also have written phosphatidylcholine. Naturopaths believe that intravenous phosphatidylcholine can enter the brain and work as a neurotransmitter, work as an antioxidant. Well, it's been studied. So far, it hasn't been shown to work, yet we were taught to use it anyway. It gets worse. We were also taught how to treat mental illness. Test for food allergies. Yes, we were taught that food allergies can apparently cause hallucinations and delusions. We were also taught to test patients for heavy metals, in case they might have heavy metal toxicity. Which heavy metals? Mercury, arsenic, lead, cadmium? All of them. Why not? They're scary sounding, so patients are going to go along with it. But there's no reason to think that heavy metal toxicity causes schizophrenia or that the average patient has been exposed to them. Remember, I believed I had cured my own autoimmune disease with diet changes and cod liver oil. So when I'm taking down these notes, I'm not thinking, this is crazy. I'm thinking, wow, medical doctors are so stupid. I bet they don't even test their schizophrenic patients for heavy metal levels or food allergies. And this is what all of the students at Bastyr are into. We love this. We believe that we are learning the medicine of the future. And we are motivated and organized enough that there are even international trips that we can take to gain experience treating patients in developing countries. After my second year, I went on one of these trips to Ghana. I was really excited about this trip, and I thought that this was my chance to use what I had learned, this medicine of the future, to improve global health. You would think that we would have at least brought with us multivitamins to help treat malnutrition, but no. We brought homeopathic remedies and supplements. We gave sugar pills to patients with malaria, parasite infections, and HIV. Before the trip, I had only taken a weekend course in intravenous therapies. So without any experience and with no supervision, I was allowed to give intravenous injections to patients who were really sick, some severely dehydrated children and others with unknown infections. At the time, this felt really cool. Now, looking back on this, I'm disgusted. There's no doubt that we were looked at as Western medical doctors who held special answers. The following year, I went to Nicaragua. We worked out of a clinic set up by naturopaths on a remote island on Lake Nicaragua. We were required to wear scrubs. Again, patients thought we were medical doctors, probably because we were white and we had the right clothes on. Medical care on the island was limited, so patients would often substitute our natural medicine for real medical care. But we mostly just prescribed a syrup made out of guava fruit, which was the local staple crop. And this fit nicely with strong traditions of herbalism on the island. Take a look at our pharmacy, filled with donations from naturopaths and supplement companies. In the picture, if you look carefully, you can see probiotics, homeopathic enzymes, tinctures made out of different plants. We used these products to treat diseases like cardiovascular disease, hepatitis, and diabetes. Do you see the problem here? Naturopaths are also organized well enough to lobby the federal government. In 2011, I attended an event called DC Fly. This is where naturopaths from all over the US gather in Washington, DC, to speak to lawmakers and to lobby for recognition as a legitimate medical profession. During this weekend, we also take training courses on how to deliver elevator speeches, as well as how to pitch the value of naturopathy to senators. So, during this weekend when I was there, I looked into the eyes of senators and I said the following: naturopaths are masters at prevention. We maintain and restore health. We are trained just like medical doctors, and we are primary care physicians. But without legislation and your support, we are unable to offer our medicine to the population. In 2011, I graduated from Bastyr and became licensed to practice in Washington. At this point, I fully believed I was a doctor. I could do all of the things that a doctor could do. I could write prescriptions, I could draw blood, I could order x-rays, I wore a stethoscope around my neck. I was really proud of myself. And I was hired into the only naturopathic pediatrics residency position. I also did naturopathic research. I helped out with a study assessing whether elderberry syrup could prevent the flu as an alternative to the flu vaccine. Spoiler alert, the results were negative. And the lead investigator opted not to publish the results. Within a year of graduating, I was hired to teach at Bastyr, and I got promoted at work. Things were going great. Then I met a boy and moved to Arizona. In Arizona, I branded myself as a natural medicine expert. I was super stoked because I got hired at a clinic with a famous naturopath. My boss, my former boss, Michael Uzik, is a naturopathic cancer specialist. He is considered to be one of the best naturopathic cancer guys in the US. And while I was building my practice, Uzik offered to let me shadow him. I thought that this was a great opportunity to see a different kind of patient and to also learn from who the profession considered to be the best. Uzik taught me the nuts and bolts of naturopathic cancer care. I learned how to mix IVs of vitamins and minerals. I learned how to intravenously inject herbal cancer-fighting substances. And I even learned how to give IVs through an injection port, which is something that chemotherapy patients often have surgically placed underneath their skin. Right about this time, my clinic also launched the Right Detox. I was the face of this program. I gave the speech that you just heard at the beginning of this talk at a health convention in order to help sell the program. New patients were coming in, and they were being funneled my way. I thought things were going awesome. One day, I was standing in the back lab area with Uzik, and we were chit-chatting. I had mentioned to him that patients had been asking about a new cancer drug that they had been receiving. It was called Ukraine. The last shipment hadn't arrived. And since patients were required to pay for this drug up front, they were beginning to get a little bit nervous. Uzik tried to reassure me. He said, "Oh, don't worry too much about this. It happens from time to time. The FDA probably confiscated it." Confiscated it? Why? Ukraine is a curious chemotherapy drug. It is made, or was made, in Austria, and it is made in part from a plant called chelidonium. It's marketed by its manufacturer as a cancer cure-all. It didn't take me long to figure out that Ukraine is not approved to treat cancer or any disease at all. This makes what UZIC was doing in terms of buying, importing, and delivering Ukraine illegal, unless you were conducting a clinical trial. We were not conducting a study. In order to get Ukraine, patients were paying thousands of dollars in cash upfront that was then diverted through a system of international money wiring that all took place outside of the clinic. This was the business. There's no good evidence to show that Ukraine works, but there are plenty of doubts about Ukraine's safety. It has been known to cause liver failure, bone marrow toxicity, and tumor bleeding. Its manufacturer was recently sentenced to 3.5 years in jail in Austria for fraud, including relabeling expired products and continuing to sell this medication. Based on the timeline of these events, it's possible that our patients were receiving this expired medication. After learning all of this, the next 72 hours were really grueling. I hired a lawyer. I confronted UZIC with what I had learned, and I resigned. I spoke to an investigator at the Attorney General's office, and I filed a complaint against UZIC with the naturopathic medical board in Arizona. I had helped deliver this medication to patients, and I felt sick about it. A longtime friend and mentor of mine named Michael Traub tried to comfort me. He encouraged me to go back to work for UZIC. He said it wasn't that big of a deal. He said what was going on with the Ukraine, no one probably got hurt, it's going to stop now anyway, no big deal. Michael Traub is the former president of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, and he is a major player in the profession. If anyone knows what naturopaths in the US are doing, it's him. His words suggested to me that naturopaths are doing shit like this all the time. As if being a naturopath somehow allows you to make up your own ethical rules and to skirt professional standards. What the fuck have I gotten myself into? I manage stress by seeking information. So, after this, I decided to go back and take a look at the information that I had deliberately ignored. I read Stephen Barrett's Quack Watch. I started to read the science-based medicine blog. And I tried really hard to look past David Gorski's, Orac's, insolence, and to understand the other perspective. But nothing made a bigger impact than this book right here, Trick or Treatment, Alternative Medicine on Trial, written by Simon Singh and Dr. Edzard Ernst. Now, if you've read this book or read anything written by Singh or Ernst, you know that they are great writers. But it took me a really long time to get through this book. So I started with the chapters that I knew wouldn't challenge my belief system so much. I never practiced acupuncture, so I started with the acupuncture chapter. And then I moved on to chiropractic because I didn't really care about chiropractic. And then I ended with homeopathy and herbal medicine. And I moved through these chapters very slowly and deliberately and at a painstakingly slow pace. And I knew by the time that I finished this book, for the very first time, that practicing naturopathy was totally unethical. I knew I was a fraud. I decided quietly to leave the profession. I didn't renew my licenses to practice, and I didn't talk about my decision with any of my naturopath friends. I didn't know how to tell them that they are frauds too. In all of this, I got engaged, and my fiance and I had plans to move to Germany, where he would start a PhD program in archaeology. Moving to Germany is a really good excuse to explain that I would no longer be practicing naturopathy. And moving to Germany also provided me with the opportunity to start over. I decided to apply to a Master of Science program in biomedical research. But in my application, I had to explain my unscientific background. So I wrote, "To the committee, I made a mistake. I entered naturopathic medical school at Bastyr with idealistic and naive notions that naturopathy could surpass modern medicine. Walking away from naturopathic medicine is the first step to correct my mistake. And now that I know better, I want to do better." And to my surprise, they accepted me. At my wedding the next month, several of my naturopath friends came. Other guests included actual medical doctors and a bunch of archaeologists with PhDs. And when my naturopath friends noticed that their name card didn't include the title doctor on it, they asked me about this. But it was my wedding, and I can do whatever I want when you're the bride, so I skirted the question. But perhaps my passive-aggressive name card making told them everything they needed to know. Naturopaths are not doctors. The next month, I moved to Germany in the middle of a very dark and very cold winter. And my program didn't start till April. I had some extra time on my hands and decided to critically comb through my entire naturopathic training. I still had all of my course syllabi and my class notes and my lobbying documents. I began to see for the first time how deep the deception went. I reached out to Jen Bellamy of Science-Based Medicine and also to Edzard Ernst. And it was Edzard who planted the idea that I should start writing. It was clear that I had been brainwashed. Bastyr and the other schools and the profession as a whole repeatedly tell naturopaths over and over again that you are medical doctors, that naturopaths are medical doctors. And how could we know otherwise? We lived and breathed in confirmation bias. And nobody challenged the system. It was okay that naturopaths believe that the government is poisoning children with vaccines. It's okay that naturopaths treat cancer using homeopathy. It's okay that naturopaths are prescribing organic, non-GMO diets to treat autoimmune diseases. And apparently it's okay that naturopaths can write prescriptions for pharmaceutical medications after taking only one course in pharmacology taught by a naturopath. This anything goes culture is the core of that profession. This is not medicine. Patients needed to know, and I felt ethically compelled to speak out. So in February 2015, I started my blog, Naturopathic Diaries. I was pissed. I had spent 8 years in the profession. I had spent over $250,000 learning homeopathy was real, conventional medicine was bad, and that medical doctors were missing the root causes of diseases that naturopaths had somehow figured out. I recalled what my lawyer in Arizona had told me while I was navigating the difficult road ahead of me with the Ukraine fiasco. He said, "Britt, you are officially on notice." It would have been easy to ignore Michael Yuzik's escapade with Ukraine. It would have been in my financial interest to stay in practice as a naturopathic doctor. But this was not the right thing to do. I was not expecting anyone to pay attention to my blog, especially no one from the naturopathic community. I was wrong. My blog struck a sensitive nerve within the community, and emails from the profession began pouring in. Speculations about why I started blogging ran wild. Someone had started the rumor that my husband had actually kidnapped me to Germany. It gets better. And that I was being forced to blog to pay off my student loans. Okay, well, I have to give this person credit for creativity. And, I mean, just wouldn't it be awesome if I could make $250,000 blogging? But for the most part, people just assumed that I was really pissed. Now, this tweet, written by a fact-checking website, named in my honor, says, "Unsuccessful as an ND, she makes an even worse skeptic." Okay. I was bitter, but not because I had failed as a naturopath. I was upset that I had been so easily fooled into thinking I was a doctor. I was now up to almost $300,000 in debt, and I had only a fake medical degree to show for it. What really upset naturopaths, though, was this petition I started. Naturopaths are not doctors. Stop legitimizing pseudoscience. In this petition, I wasn't saying anything new. The information was the same information that I had blogged about. But for some reason, this really threatened naturopaths. So they responded by starting a petition against my petition. Recognize licensed naturopathic physicians for the safe and effective care they provide. This was started by Ryan Cliché. That's his real name. Of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And in it, he accuses me of defamation, and again, I was called unsuccessful. It seems that naturopaths only know how to define success by the amount of money you can make from selling quackery. But in order to do this, you have to fool patients, and you have to fool yourself. So by this measure, I am proud to say that I am probably one of the most unsuccessful naturopaths on the planet. The majority of naturopaths who email me now try to convince me that naturopathy has its merits. Not all naturopaths, they say. Not all naturopaths use homeopathy. Not all naturopaths are anti-vaccines. They try to convince me that they are evidence-based practitioners and that they are good, hardworking people. Now, I agree that most naturopaths have good intentions, but good intentions and medical expertise are not the same thing. What is true is that all naturopaths are trained extensively in homeopathy. We're all taught how to use herbal medicine, water therapies, chiropractic care, and we're taught a whole host of wacky theories about toxins and detoxification and autoimmune and how to stimulate the immune system. We're taught that medical doctors overdiagnose and overtreat. We're taught the reason why so many people are sick today is because conventional medicine fails to treat the whole person. And we're taught the ethical way to practice is to look back to the good old days, to a time when medicine was natural. Before surgery, before drugs, basically before science met medicine. What's happening with these special pleading naturopaths is that they think they're practicing evidence-based medicine just because they say so. Let's take a look at some gems from my inbox. Dear Britt, I'm a primary care physician who happens to be an ND. I applaud your courage for speaking out about the issues in naturopathic medicine and agree with much of what you write from my own experience attending Bastyr. Basically, what I want you to know is that your experience is not how all naturopathic physicians practice. There are some of us that were able to use our educations and kept growing. Many of us ND physicians would like Bastyr and the other ND schools to improve their clinical education. However, there are several obstacles to that, including derisive blogging. There is definitely a context for the truths you write, don't get me wrong. I would be your first supporter, but your understanding is based on your negative experience of naturopathic medicine, and you are wielding an axe. Okay, let me get this straight. My blog, criticizing naturopathic education, is preventing naturopathic education from undergoing change? That doesn't even make any sense. And he agrees with my criticism that Bastyr is lacking in medical training and standards of care. Yet somehow, he was able to train himself and keep growing and has now declared himself a primary care physician? Come on, I'm not that naive anymore. Let's look at another one. Dear Britt, I think you could be a voice from within the profession rather than outside it. We all need viewpoints in this profession to remain objective. I don't see my job as a religion. I am providing a service, and I try to do the least harm and the most reasonable thing for my patients. Many of us think homeopathy is confusing and questionable. Many of us believe in vaccination. It's simply not true to categorically talk about the controversial and questionable aspects of our medicine and leave out the good. Okay. I don't think confusing is the right word to describe homeopathy here. And this is just so frustrating that naturopaths continue to tiptoe around homeopathy. I mean, call it like it really is. It's quackery. It's also the lowest hanging fruit. Without a doubt, the profession needs to get rid of it, but they refuse. Let's take a look at one more email. Dear Britt, I'm a recently graduated ND that became more of a critical thinker towards the end of my ND school career. The more I investigated, the more disappointed I came with my education. I have mixed feelings about your change.org petition. On the one hand, I agree that we shouldn't be primary care physicians. Great. On the other, I wonder to myself, does she not realize that we're not all quacks? Some of us are trying to make an honest living. I resent you for your ruthlessness, yet applaud you for hopefully turning away prospective naturopathic students with your writing. Phew. Okay. Now, actually, my heart kind of goes out to this guy. He knows he's made a terrible mistake. He's financially trapped, and he's trying to make it work. But since I'm ruthless, I need to tell him how it really is. He has to get out of the profession. There is no doubt that his patients are being taken advantage of. He is not a doctor, yet somehow he has been able to train himself in medicine and call himself a primary care physician. It just doesn't make sense. These emails highlight the ultimate problem with accepting naturopathy as a legitimate medical profession. Naturopaths can basically do and say whatever they want and get away with it. There are no standards of care, and there's an extreme amount of wiggle room in what the profession will allow you to do. It's humbling that most of my former colleagues in general agree with what I write. But when it comes to taking a stance against the unethical practices rampant in the profession, they all bargain for special treatment. I want to say it again. There's no doubt that most naturopaths have good hearts. But without going to medical school, they are nothing more than good-hearted charlatans. They think they are practicing ethically. They think they are practicing safely. But they are so very confused and still dangerous. I had to leave the profession to see it for what it really is. This argument that not all naturopaths do whatever is nothing more than a failure to engage in the systematic problems within the profession. These counterexamples show nothing other than the prevalence of the no true Scotsman fallacy. But clearly, it must be my derisive blogging preventing any change. It's been less than 3 years since I left naturopathy, and it's been less than 2 since I've started blogging. Looking back, I realize now I was still pretty naive when I started to speak out against the profession. I expected Usyk to get skewered by the Arizona Naturopathic Board for his use of Ukraine. But after a cursory investigation, the board delivered Usyk a letter of reprimand. This letter is basically a slap on the wrist. The board even twisted the truth to say that Usyk had voluntarily stopped using Ukraine. Now remember, the packages had just stopped arriving one day. This is probably because the manufacturer of the drug had just been arrested in Austria at the same time. Usyk is still practicing as a naturopathic cancer specialist. He's still considered to be one of the best naturopathic cancer guys in the country and has a great reputation. And he has called me a criminal. I accept this as evidence that the profession needs to change. And I am proud that I'm working with others to make this change happen. In the United States, we are making some progress. No naturopathic licensing bill has been passed in the last 2 years. And this last year, licensing was actually repealed in the state of Idaho. In many other states, attempts to broaden the naturopathic scope of practice have been squashed. In California, my home state, a bill was recently defeated that would have allowed naturopaths to prescribe pharmaceutical medications and to practice without the supervision of a medical physician. This was a huge loss for the naturopaths in the state, and it had to hurt, and I am really proud to say that I had something to do with it. Naturopathy is also coming under intense scrutiny in Canada after the death of a toddler with meningitis who was treated by a naturopath with echinacea. Medical physicians in Canada are outraged, as they should be, that naturopaths are allowed to call themselves doctors, diagnose disease, and treat patients, including children. In the UK this year, medical physicians wrote up a case about a young boy with autism who was hospitalized after being treated with silver, herbs, vitamins, and minerals by a naturopath. He was hospitalized for dangerously elevated calcium levels. The medical physicians were urging doctors to be diligent about asking patients about alternative medicine use, and they were cautioning patients that alternative medicine can be very dangerous. I agree. I've repeatedly made the call that naturopaths should not be allowed to call themselves doctors or physicians. The use of this terminology is very confusing, and it unfairly places the burden of vetting medical training onto the public. Naturopaths should also be banned from treating children. As a naturopathic pediatrician myself, I received less than 10% of the medical training that a medical pediatrician receives. Naturopaths are duping parents into believing that they can competently provide medical care to their children. Sometimes I slip back into these 5 stages of grief. Sadness comes up a lot. My husband can tell you I've had more than one existential crisis. I also get angry, especially when I hear stories of children being harmed by alternative medicine. Fortunately, I've never regressed into denial. Once I knew what naturopathy was all about, I never tried to justify being part of this unethical profession. I still find myself very perplexed about my previous ways of thinking, still stymied by so many things like, how did I miss the lies? And I'm still not quite sure how to effectively communicate with patients of naturopathy who are often naturalistic crusaders in order to help guide them back to medicine. But I do know this right now. I know I would never have been able to do any of it. I would have never been able to make the public leap from naturopath to scientist without the support of this community. The science and skepticism community has embraced me with open arms. And this is really saying something amazing about all of you. I was a quack. I did lots of unacceptable things as a make-believe doctor. I prescribed homeopathy, I delayed vaccines, and I called myself a physician when I wasn't. I remember being terrified of you all. Running into Stephen Barrett would have been one of my worst nightmares. Now, Dr. Barrett sends me emails of support. I am acutely aware that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. Your support has helped me detox an entire belief system and an entire way of life. Now, I am so grateful for the beginning of the rest of my life. Thank you.